the Global Gateway. Very happy to welcome you all to today's discussion on behalf of Eurodad, Counterbalance, ActionAid, and of course CONCORD. My name is Tanya Cox, and I'm the director of CONCORD. And as you probably know, we're hosting this event the very day before the Global Gateway Forum, which will bring a whole lot of dignitaries from around the world to Brussels to discuss the Global Gateway projects, how things are going, plans for the future. We know that they have a few announcements that they want to be making. And interestingly and belatedly, but very welcome, also at last civil society has been invited to the Global Gateway Forum. So we're very happy about that. But of course, we would rather be a real part of the programme than an add-on at the last minute. My father used to say to me and my sister, girls, there's always two sides to any story, when we were having a quarrel, basically. And of course, I've realised subsequently that more or less as many actors as you have in a story, you have as many sides. Today, we want to be sharing our side of the story, civil society side of the story, because this is getting a rather little airing. It won't be discussed at the Global Gateway Forum as we would want it discussed. And so this is an opportunity for us to come together and to share whatever may be on our minds around the Global Gateway. Can be sharing intel, can be sharing concerns, but this is what we're here for today. Because despite the launch of the Global Gateway 4 years ago, which to me seems quite a long time ago, there's actually very little in the way of concrete information about Global Gateway and how things are going. Very little that I've heard, at least, in terms of concrete successes that have come out of the Global Gateway. And despite all of this, and the fact that we're still 4 years later, this is still the only way forward for the European Union. It's the only thing that makes sense in terms of the future of international cooperation. So I think that what we're here to do is to maybe give that other side of the story and look at some of these practices that are going on. So even if we don't yet know about the successes and the outcomes and the impacts, some things are beginning to show. Some perhaps questionable practices, concerns that we might be raising, largely obviously in the social and environmental domains. And this is why I'm so happy that we've managed to get such interesting participants to our panel. I'm very grateful to everybody who is joining us today to share their stories. And I'd also encourage you in the audience and also online to be thinking as well about things that you might like to share when it comes to later in the day. But with this, over to Shada Islam. I'm super happy to welcome you, Shada. Thank you so much for agreeing to moderate the panel today. So round of applause, please, for Shada, to welcome Shada. And a huge thank you from all of us in CONCORD Europe, Counterbalance and ActionAid to the panelists who have agreed to join us today and share and exchange. And I just wish you all a very happy discussion, interesting and fruitful conversation. Shada, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Tanya. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for setting the scene as well. As you've said, we're going to be hearing a lot about the Global Gateway because of the forum tomorrow, but it has become the flagship of the EU's development cooperation effort, or whatever international partnerships. Most of its interaction with the countries outside the EU is going to be focused and is being focused very much on this centerpiece. And I think what we're going to try and do now in this panel discussion is a bit of a reality check to move beyond the headlines and the bylines and look at really what is happening beyond the PR and the hype, and see if the critics are correct. And Tanya, you said it, that there are some, let's say, major structural problems with the Global Gateway in regards of participation, environmental and social risks, but also the overall picture that one gets, and I've been in this business for quite a long time, is also of Eurocentrism. So We're going to also be forward-looking, and I'd like my panelists to look and make some constructive and positive contributions in terms of how we can actually make this more of a democratic and inclusive process. So joining me now for the discussion are Frank Venderscott. Frank, please come in here. He's director at Counterbalance and has over a decade of experience researching, campaigning, and advocating for economic justice. Welcome. Joining us online is Veronica Fadzai-Zdano. She's Regional Program Advisor on the extractive industry at Oxfam Southern Africa. So she's online. Kaisha Atakanova, please come here, environmental and civil society advocate from Kazakhstan. And you are the Regional Development Advisor, Civil Society Development Association, known as ARGO. In the room also, and I'm looking forward to meeting you, is Hikma Bashkour. You're the author of a Moroccan country study on hydrogen, written for MINAFEM, the Movement for Economic Development and Ecological Justice. Hikma, if I could ask you just to move to this seat, because we have now Magnus Guldberg from the Danish Foreign Service, who is currently working for the PERM rep here in Brussels. And Magnus, you specialize in the Global Gateway. And the reason I've moved seats around like this is because Magnus has to leave at just before 10 and don't want it to be too disruptive. And joining us online is Udo Bullmann. And he has been a member of the European Parliament since 1999 and is a member of the Social Democratic Party. So, of Germany. And so joining us now in terms of rules of the game, I'm going to have a round of discussions, possibly 2 or 3 rounds, one after the other. I hope that all my panelists will be short and snappy and to the point. And then I'm going to open the floor to questions from you and my colleague Stephanie over there. For all of you who are online, please do send your questions by Zoom, and she will voice them for us here, because we want this to here in the room, but also online. So let's begin. And I'm going to quote what the European Commission says about the Global Gateway. It is, and I'm sure you've learned it all by heart by now, it is a strategy to boost smart, clean, and secure connections in the digital, energy, and transport sectors, while also strengthening health, education, and research systems worldwide. The aim, as we all know by now, is to mobilize up to 300 billion euros in investments. And Commissioner Sikela recently said, I have a clear mandate to move Global Gateway from startup to scale up. So Frank, my first question is to you, is about, after monitoring the evolution of the Global Gateway for 4 years, as Tanya has told us, what is your perspective?
Very much. I would say, and so with Counterbalance and some of the organizations which we organize today, we've been doing a lot of research and advocacy work on the Global Gateway. And what we see happening is actually like it uses development budget, but this development budget is used to guarantee loans for public investment banks, which mainly targets private sector support. And actually the aid goes in a way more to these private actors than to local development. And what we've seen is that actually with the Global Gateway coming, that it integrated a geopolitical and own economic EU interest into this development logic. And what we've seen evolving, and what we see where in the direction that the Global Gateway is going, that this competitiveness logic, the interest of the EU itself, mainly its own companies, and the geopolitical interests, that these are increasingly dominating the strategy. We see this in the discussion on the new budget that is being proposed. We see this in how other actors are being involved, such as export credit agencies. We see also that there is a huge this scale up that Sikela talks about. This translates. It looks like it translates itself into wanting to speed up a lot the process. And what it creates is that the process becomes even more undemocratic. It's already clear that in the decision-making process until now, civil society in general, but especially local communities in countries where the projects happen, that they have a very little to no role in the whole process of making projects. And this is, in my view, it's the general direction in which we are going, in spite of all the nice words of the Commission. This is set to get worse. And this shows a lot into the energy and the climate projects, which are half of the whole Global Gateway strategy, which have a kind of extractive logic, and it goes against, while the Global Gateway is being used as the main offer in the development, for example, the Finance for Development conference earlier this year, or as climate finance, that actually it's perpetuating a kind of extractive logic instead of assuming the historic responsibility that Europe as a rich continent has towards the rest of the world to help with sustainable development.
Right, just a very quick follow-up and to be the devil's advocate in a sense, right? So there's actually, in today's geopolitical environment, fierce competition and all the rest of it, is it wrong to think about European interests and European competitiveness when we're dealing with economic giants across the world? Is it substantially wrong, or is it the way it's being done that is perhaps faulty?
I think there's a really good emblematic project. Really, a few weeks ago, Sikela, together with the parliamentary delegation, went to Namibia for a flagship main project on hydrogen. And in the meantime, RWE, the big German company, he pulled out of the project, not because of the local communities are heavily against the project, which is on their lands, but because the commercial logic has changed and the hydrogen targets are based on unrealistic targets, even within the EU itself. The European Court of Auditors has admitted this. So in spite of that, next to the fact that it's not really helpful for if we want to help develop other countries, it's also not helping really, and competitiveness is not the word that I would use, but if we want to have a just transition and an economy based on the just transition, which also helps people inside of Europe, it's not helpful either.
So basically what you're saying, there are ways of making it more win-win, and I think let's explore that perhaps in this discussion later on. Let me turn now to Veronica. Veronica, in terms of you're joining us online from Oxfam Southern Africa. So your experience of working on the ground, so how is this initiative perceived, and who do you think benefits most from the communities, the respective communities that are being targeted?
Thank you so much. So, greetings from Zimbabwe, Harare. I think for us as Oxfam in Southern Africa, which is a cluster of countries mainly targeting Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, and Malawi, we do have quite a number of initiatives that are earmarked to be projects under the EU Global Gateway. And specifically, I think for this webinar or for this meeting, I will make reference to the Lobito Corridor, which is a transport infrastructure that has been born out of a memorandum of understanding involving the EU, the US, the Africa Development Bank, Africa Finance Corporation, and countries such as Angola as well, and Zambia, and the DRC. So for a region like ours, where one of the key resources which we as our governments have earmarked and the people have earmarked in terms of broad-based development in the area of critical raw materials. We talk about copper, we talk about lithium, which are key resources that are key for the development of technology in terms of the energy transition. Minerals have been concerned around is about a different resource extraction model, which ultimately changes the way business has been done, where Africa has always been seen as a critical raw material exporter without any form of industrialization that translates to the people of Africa. And so the discourse has been that this model has to change, where African raw materials do actually contribute towards the broad-based industrialization of its people. And mainly one of these aspects has been around ensuring that there is mineral beneficiation and value addition to also harness on the opportunities that come beyond the raw materials of the export of raw materials. And as such, the Lobito Corridor is a transport infrastructure that is earmarked to promote trade, particularly around various facets of key value chains, mineral value chains, which I make mention of critical minerals. And as such, the Lobito Corridor is positioned to be a multifaceted transport infrastructure that is aligned to the economic development models of countries such as Zambia. But at the same time, there are also fears in terms of what this partnership, in terms of this development looks like. Particularly that this transport mechanism is meant to actually cut transport costs and the time in terms of shipping these critical raw materials to Europe and other parts of the world, such as the United States. And as such, then questions start emanating around the citizenry and the public that ultimately what is the end game in terms of the EU Global Gateway, in terms of some of these projects, such as the Lobito Corridor, as well as critical raw material understanding that have been entered to. And the questions really emanate that, is it this a perpetual a model which has seen Africa just being a battlefield in terms of the geopolitics, or ultimately will the EU global partnership investments that are going to be made really foster a win-win situation where African governments are really going to be active players, including in terms of the decision and the deal structuring towards how the investments are going to be made and channeled, importantly towards issues of beneficiation and value addition, and not just exportation of raw materials. So these are some of the nuances that are emanating from the African discourse around projects such as the Lobito Corridor, as well as some of these memorandum of understanding that have been entered to with regards to critical raw materials for finance, for production of climate energy technology. For now, I think I'll pause here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Veronica. Indeed, we'll talk about that later. But I just had a very quick follow-up for you, Veronica. Are you online and can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, sorry. Well, this part of the world, the internet can be a problem, so I'm trying to minimize my video, but I'm quite around.
So I just had thank you. No, I just had a very quick follow-up in terms of your concerns, and you voiced them very eloquently now. I was just wondering, is there any channel for you to sort of communicate that to your government, or also the foreign partners, the international partners involved in the corridor?
For us, one of the key challenges has been that one of the key facets and principles which these projects under the EU Global Gateway are meant to address or to promote around highest standards around, for example, issues of human rights, environmental due diligence. And for us, these are key areas that as Oxfam, we have really been vocal and interested in terms of ensuring that there is sustainable trade and development with regards to Africa's natural resources and some of these partnerships which African governments are entering into with various actors such as EU. And for us, our biggest concern has been that civil society really fails to be seen as an important key stakeholder in terms of this discourse, and particularly leveraging on the expertise that civil society has been leading in terms of some of these key issues. And without civil society really being given a seat in terms of the decision making, earlier as the opening statement, that civil society is not really given much dominance and much voice as compared to the sector in terms of investments. And for us, this is a key concern because ultimately there is need for a narrative that closely monitors, that provides oversight in terms of the commitments which are earmarked towards a different partnership model particularly for us in the global south, where really private sector investments have not really respected issues of human rights, issues of environmental due diligence, and many other issues. And without this discourse being located within the EU Global Gateway, this is something that continues to be a worrisome issue for us. And we continue to make a case that civil society does need to be given a seat in the terms of the decision making, and also the same value given to private sector, given to us as civil society.
Right. Thank you, Veronica, for making this point. I'm going to turn now to Kasia. Kasia, you were nodding along when Veronica was speaking. So I'll give you the floor. And after you, if I could just say, Udo, I will ask you, because I know you have to leave, and I'd like to put at least 2 questions to you. So, sorry, not Udo, Magnus. I do apologize. Please, Kasia.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me. It's a great opportunity to give my voice from Central Asia, from Kazakhstan, be here and participate tomorrow as a forum. So when in Kazakhstan first heard about European Union Global Gateway initiative, it sounds like very good and then, very excited opportunity for our country. So it was presented as new partnership what could connect our country with European green transition and also renewable energy, of course, and modern infrastructure. All of this excited really us. But for civil society, however, we have, of course, first question, what does in practical in reality? And will the community have they any role on this great opportunity? And over the past 2 years, government of Kazakhstan signed an agreement with European Commission and hydrogen project, battery, critical minerals, lot of projects. And big projects are now being discussed. So $50 billion hydrogen project, new mining and processing lithium, rare materials, and major infrastructure on Trans-Caspian transport route. It on paper look really good. Yeah, and they are presented as national success story for our country, and we'll have diversified supply chain for Europe and Kazakhstan when Kazakhstan can be center of green technology. It's our dream, like. So, but when we look from the ground level, picture more complicated. What we learn, local people don't receive so much information about that. And environmental impact assessment still very weak. Civil society organizations are not systematically invited to consultation, as I learned now from my speakers before. It's same situation in Kazakhstan. So, and if we look like this project huge in scale, but space for civic participation very small. So, and if, for example, when Sweden hydrogen project, it's in our Caspian Sea region, announced environmental groups raised concern about the enormous water and land resources what they require. And we know Caspian Sea under degradation now. It was a place which we have huge oil industry in the during past 30 years. And biodiversity and all of this, a life of nature, it's degradation. And Caspian Sea also degradation. And now hydrogen project, of course. All people now concerned about, if you know, we had the Aral Sea catastrophe in 20th century, they died the sea. And maybe it's people concerned about what happened with Caspian Sea in 21st century. So environmental impact, so in this concern, we at least note some regional authority, and also they create some look like dialogue, but we not see what civil society was involved with this. No mechanism, we don't know how to do that. It's not clear, unfortunately. And also in reality, I'm just back from field research. I was the territory with local community, and I find with local authorities and local people from farmers, from villages, they thought, oh, we have a wonderful, great project coming soon. And of course, they think about job. They think about technology. But other side, these people, farmers especially, they asked me, do you think it's water be clean after this new mining around our villages? And it will be safety for our pasture because a lot of the farmers. And also this territory was affected in Soviet time with nuclear test explosion, Soviet Semipalatinsk nuclear explosion. And they was, look like open for all of this new project. But other side, they concerned because they had enough impact before, they had experience not so good. So it's situation which we can now explain current situation. So
Thank you very much for that. I have to say, listening to three commentaries up to now, and I think, Magnus, you must have heard the very, very serious concerns from our civil society friends about not being able to voice their concerns, about some of these decisions being taken above their heads. And how does that sort of fit in with this with the idea of bringing coherence across trade, energy development, some very interesting and I would say important ideas that have come forward from the EU institutions, but the application, the implementation seems to be a little not on track, or at least not as efficient and as inclusive as would work more for our own interests, but also for the interests of our partners. So any commentary you have now?
Yes, thank you very, very much. Thank you for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here, not just to share my own views, but equally importantly to hear the views that I've heard so far, which have all been very, very interesting. If I may start on a slightly different note, because above all, I think the Global Gateway embodies the right approach for the EU, given the geopolitical changes that we are witnessing. Fundamentally, it's based on mutually beneficial partnerships and shared interests between EU and our partner countries. And partner countries, they continue to request more investments from us, not just a donor-recipient relationship. And that's in our interest, and it's in their interest. I think that a priori is a dignified and respectful approach. And it's a needed one because the estimated global investment gap in key SDG sectors between 2015 and 2030 has been estimated to be $2.5 trillion. And meanwhile, total official development assistance in 2024 was $212 billion. But if we look towards the private sector, the top 10 asset managers of the world manage over $30 trillion. So if we tap into that, there is a route for us to bridge this investment gap. But of course, our interests are broader than merely investments. The European offer should also be a value-based one. And that's why the principles of Global Gateway, of course, include democratic values and good governance. But turning maybe a bit more to what some things that have been said, I mean, civil society organizations are among those who uphold the EU's values, including commitment to democracy, human rights, and have a lot to bring to the table. You can be among the ones who uphold the high standards and provide this deep knowledge about local conditions. So the involvement of civil society organizations can be integral in our offer to our partner countries. Now, it's not without its challenges. I think that several have been mentioned already. Also in the introduction by Ms. Cox, we also heard this about communication. I think that's also one of the more fundamental ones. There is still, among many actors, maybe not the sufficient clarity about the impact that Global Gateway makes. So to make that, we also need to communicate more effectively. Yeah.
I have to ask a follow-up as well, Magnus. First of all, don't you think it's important 4 years on to have learned some lessons? Because these conversations have been ongoing for more than 4 years, actually, leading up to the launch of the strategy, because it's been going on since China launched its Belt and Road Initiative. So this is something that we're all very familiar with. And connectivity has been a big part of our relationship with the ASEAN countries as well. And so there are many lessons to be learned. This, of course, is wider, it's global. So are they being learned? And are we sort of changing our approach in terms of becoming more inclusive and actually bringing these concerns to maybe the national governments, but also into the strategy?
So maybe just shall we say, clarifications so that, with the EU and the Global Gateway is no exception, several institutional actors are in this, and I'm part of the council, so the member states where I chair the negotiations among those. So I can maybe only give a part of the answer. But what I can say is that with Danish presidency as regards the Global Gateway, we've put an emphasis on exactly stock taking. We share very much Commissioner Sikela's ambition of taking the Global Gateway from startup to scale up. We think that in that, shall we say, that motto, for lack of a better word, I think there is this, you need to apply the lessons learned. You need to have some reflections on what's worked and what has maybe not worked as well. Let's see, maybe with the forum, some of these things will become clearer, but that's maybe more of a question for the Commission to answer.
So if so you are, and sorry, this is my last question to you, and you are sort of working on there's a working group within the council that looks at Global Gateway, etc. So maybe without sharing too many secrets, you can give us some of the concerns that member states are bringing forward. I'm sure there are, and also this kind of dichotomy between commercial interests, competitiveness interests, and development interests. How do you suggest that they be reconciled in an efficient way so that everyone actually benefits?
No, I think this. This reconciling, I mean, that is something that we are, of course, very attentive to. I can speak for what the Danish presidency has emphasized. That is, among other things, this need to strengthen private sector engagement. Going back to what I said about this investment gap and the communication that is sometimes not that's not going through as clearly as we would sometimes want. But with this, shall we say, reconciling that you call it, I think, again, we can refer back to the equal partnerships, where from partners we hear they want investments, particularly in infrastructure. And so I think there is a lot of overlap between our interests and partners' development needs. And our investments from European actors can certainly help improve the conditions for the people in these local areas. So although I cannot give a finite answer, I don't know if anyone can, I think at least a part of the answer is a frank and an honest dialogue with partners about our respective interests. And when I say interests, I of course also include our values, our democratic standards characterized by a strong civil society is a key interest of the EU, both at home and abroad.
Thank you, Magnus. I mean, I could keep asking you a lot of questions, but we will move on. But please do stay until the last minute when you actually have to leave. Hikma, sorry to have kept you waiting. And so let's continue the conversation back to what you think from your experience, especially working with women on this issue of hydrogen projects. What is your experience and what lessons can you impart to us?
Thank you so much, Sasha, and I would like first to thank everyone joining us here today in this room and online for this very important discussion on this really important topic. So this is a very important question because what's happening now in Morocco with hydrogen is really significant, but it also raises deep questions about justice and equity. But before digging into these aspects, let me give you like a short overview of the context. So our government already selected 6 major hydrogen projects, okay? So with an investment of around $32 billion. These projects are mainly based in the south of the country because of the strong potential for both solar and wind energy in this region. So as you know, we use the renewable potential energy to produce hydrogen and transform it into ammonia for exports. That's the first problem. So the most advanced project in these 6 projects is the Spika project. It's based in the Gelmim Oued Noun region in the south, and it's led by Total Energy. together with a Danish company. I think it's AP Moller Capital. So the real question today, it's not about Morocco's ambition, but it's about the European approach, which I think, Magnus, it's not right, okay? Because through initiatives like the Global Gateway, Europe is presenting these partnerships as being win-win, like sharing the benefits. Yet in practice, the social and economic weight is still very unequal. Like, in simple words, Europe defines its own decarbonization goals with its own standards, and then look for countries like ours to supply the energy needed to achieve these goals. So, yes, the Global Gateway aims to finance large-scale hydrogen and renewable energy projects for experts. The first concern is that the model relies heavily on loans rather than grants. So this could worsen the debt and austerity pressures that many African countries are already dealing with. To bring real perspective from the ground, I was part of a study conducted by MENAFEM, which is a feminist organization. So this study focused on the social economic impacts of future hydrogen projects in 3 countries, Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt. And we gathered like direct insights from local communities and women by interviewing them. And what clearly emerged from this work is that the current European approach risks replicating a kind of green colonialism, where Africa provides the clean energy and raw materials needed for European transition without real local benefits. So from my conversations with these grassroots organizations, people are not against renewable energy projects, but what they need is projects that creates jobs, that preserves water and other natural resources, and also that involves women and local communities in the planning and governance. And I believe that if the Global Gateway is really serious about fairness, it should apply the same principles we discuss in climate diplomacy. And I'm talking specifically about the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, because Europe, as a historical amateur and wealthy bloc, has a responsibility to offer grants to ensure technology transfer and capacity building, and not adding more debts in African countries. Because once again, just transition cannot be imported from Brussels or Washington. It must be co-created, and it must be co-created with people who live closest to the land and people who will bear the consequences of these projects.
I guess far be it from me to suggest that you make certain points to your fellow colleagues in the EU, but I think what we've heard so far about, also just now about debt and jobs, I think these are very important messages to take to your colleagues at the forum tomorrow. And the green colonialism that you have talked about.
I have one last point,
yes,
if I may.
Go ahead and make your last point.
Just talking about Magnus when he said that this is the right approach because of the current geopolitical dynamics in Europe. I think that's another point, because both Europe and China, they must stop taking Africa as a ground, as a battling ground. Okay, so it's not about the geopolitical dynamics. Like, we are not responsible for your keeping your competitiveness and like dealing with grants our like whole life. This is not fair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Udo Bullman, are you online? Sorry to have kept you
Yes,
waiting.
good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, yes, we can see you. No, it's very, very interesting to have you, to bring you in now, because you've heard our 5 colleagues now, and I was just wondering for some of your responses, because you have actually written to the European Commission and asked for more information on just the issues we've been talking about. So transparency, accountability, and very important, the role of the European Parliament. So your comments are very welcome now.
So good morning to all of you, and especially to the panelists. Very happy to being able to participate, unfortunately only from Strasbourg, so greetings from here. We are in the midst of the plenary week, otherwise I would have loved to be with you in Brussels. Yes, this question immediately points out to the weakest element of Global Gateway. But let me first of all say, where do we come from? We see, and I'm happy that Magnus is with us and is very clear, we see that Global Gateway is the external action strategy of the forthcoming years, in the ownership of the Commission, but also in the ownership of the Council. There is no doubt about that. And today, our discussion is very timely. Today, the board is meeting. The Global Gateway Board, I think it's more or less the first time since the very beginning of the project that they are meeting in Brussels. The board consists of the representatives of the member states. I do not know whether Magnus has the chance to be part of that, or whether somebody else will represent Denmark. But normally it's in the hands of the foreign ministries to co-decide the way forward. Ursula von der Leyen was in charge, has now given the responsibility to Commissioner Sikela. And we start with the major problem, and the major problem is governance. The European Parliament is invited with its 3 chairs, the chair of Development Committee, the chair of Foreign Affairs, and the chair of the Trade Committee, but they are only observers. They are not co-decision makers. And let me be clear about that. We have 2 budgetary authorities in the European Union, the Council and the European Parliament, and they are not on equal footing here, because the Council in the format of Team Europe is co-deciding on what is going on, whereas the Parliament is put on the level of an observer status. What is left with the Parliament to stick to the juridical analysis is the obligation to scrutinize what is going on, because this is not only what we wish to do, this is a legal obligation in NDG Global Europe, in the existing legislation that is founding the work plans. Within these work plans, we have also the agreement of NDG that 93% or at least of our expenditure should qualify as ODA. What is ODA? ODA is clearly defined by the OECD that it should primarily aim at benefiting our partner countries. Also, that is very clear. So you can talk about whatever, but this is the legal basis. The European Parliament is on the scrutiny point. You know yourself that if you do proper scrutiny, you are also doing programming. and at least 93% has to be in the best interest of our partner countries in their population. This is the legal status we are coming from, and I have major doubts that we are in the current practices are living up to that. This is why we launched cross-party wise this questions to the Commission, and we are looking forward to the political debate about it. My major concern is that the governance structure does not enable Council and Commission to have a proper involution of parliamentarians, neither on national nor on the European scale. And as far as I have been talking for years now with the representatives of the Commission, I have not received any appropriate answer to that gap, crucial gap. That is my number one. And insofar it coincides with the criticism of our panelists that there is a lack of ownership on the ground in our partner countries, and that there is a lack of involution of local population in our partner country. Number one. But there is also number two, if you allow, and I would like to showcase the full arsenal of my arguments, because unfortunately I have some parliamentary obligations here in Strasbourg, and I will not be able to follow until the very end this interesting conversation. We cannot deny, and this is, it looks like a contradiction, but it is not a contradiction. In my view, we cannot deny the wish of our partner countries and their population to boost economic development and to find new qualified jobs and perspectives for their population. This is in the best interest of our countries, but by no means this is a reason to stop to invest ourselves in education and in health as a public good in our partner countries. No reason and not justification for that. But, and here the but, yes, we cannot deny the interest, this is a million cases justified interest to positive economic development, and we should not close our eyes. And this is where Magnus has a point in a case, and I have to say, I was, Frank, I was on this mission in Namibia, and your assessment, beg your pardon, is partially right and partially wrong in my eyes. If you see, for instance, that people in the midst of the desert are using solar energy to produce green iron out of the waste coming from South Africa in the midst of the desert, not harming any local population, quite the opposite, doing vocational training, bringing people into jobs, and by doing so, increase the richness of added value production within the country is good and not bad. And if we finance that, and this is partly the engagement in Namibia, I will not criticize it, I will support it. That brings me immediately, but I have no doubts that your cases are existing, but that brings me immediately to the point, no, we cannot throw out the baby with the bathwater. We have to have a strategic debate. And what are the goals of this strategic debate? First of all, to protect what is the legal obligation? Fight against poverty, education, health. But please do the second step as well. We need to occupy the economic debate and to get it right. Because I'm very much with Hikmah. We should not deny the new technological developments and the chances for our African partner countries, but we need to benchmark them, and we need to assess to what extent what we are doing is really in the best interest of the population in the partner countries. And you have population where 50%, like in Namibia, is below 15 years, and the guys are looking for jobs. And they are looking for vocational training, especially in a country where primary education is not too bad. There is different cases of more fragile contexts. Here in these cases, we have to concentrate on increasing added value production within the countries. And how do we do that? my demand is to make HIGMA's requirements operational. And we request from the Commission to showcase three things. First of all, do you adopt the inequality marker? Inequality marker was introduced by Jutta Opelainen in the last mandate, intending to give proof to what extent we support the lower 40% of the population in our partner countries. Yes, do electricity, but if you go to Windhoek, that was part of my mission, then you see 60% of the people in a mid-income country are living in informal settlements, without electricity, without fresh running water, without sanitary facilities. So bring in the light for these people. So that is the inequality marker, and that is to be benchmarked if we do electricity projects. Secondly, how far can we include local SMEs? Because they are the bridge to local knowledge transfer, and they are the bridge to building up what is my third point, decent job creation and decent vocational training schemes. Only if the Commission and the Council can showcase to what extent these three criteria are met, I can say yes to the further development, because this is the obligation of the treaty. Thank you very much, but this is my political position.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I know you have to go, Udo, so thank you for finding the time, but I do have one follow-up question for you, because you've made some very important points about governance and transparency. And I'm just very curious. So you've written along with some of your other colleagues to the Commission asking for more information on these issues, and you haven't received that information yet. What is the follow-up?
No. We are waiting for that. We will debate it in plenary. And this is the big issue for the forthcoming legislation on the MFF, as well as on global Europe, which is the central instrument, foreign affairs instrument for the next period of the MFF.
Right. And at the forum that opens tomorrow, the official forum, the high-level forum, are there representatives from the European Parliament that will be making some of the points that you've made so well today?
I will attend some meetings, but I will not, as a co-rapporteur for Global Gateway, I will not have a speaker's role. That was different in the past. When Jutta Opelainen still had the development days, this was the original format of the meeting, then the Parliament had much more space to argue. I have heard that my chair of the development committee will show up in one of the panels, but I have not seen the final program. It was like a bit of a problem to get hold of the final program until recently.
Thank you very much indeed, Udo. I think you made some very, very important points. Let's give a round of applause to Udo. Please stay with us if you can. Otherwise, thank you very much for being here. Thank you. Frank, so let's have a second round, and then I'll go to the participants here. You heard a lot, and I think there's a lot that you can tell us a bit more than in the beginning about all the different elements that have been raised. Perhaps starting with what Udo has told us about the governance structures, the lack of transparency, but then also going to what Magnus has said about how this is the right approach in the end. So please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think one of the key things is to really look at how these projects are happening, how they're decided, what is the process, what is it that we were talking about, due diligence, human rights, due diligence, environmental impacts, etc. And what is actually is there's a lot of actors involved. You have the guarantees from the EU level. There can be also development budget from member states involved. There's the European Investment Bank, which implements a lot of this, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and then there's the development banks from the member states who can do projects. So there's a whole series of actors. Then there's engagement with export credit agencies, which probably is an actor that you don't know, but they are instances in member states who help with the economic operations of their own companies outside of Europe. So they really have a totally EU interest, member state interest mandate. Okay. There is no unified process for how a global gateway project happens. It is the implementing institutions which use their own processes, etc. And the Commission says by default, that's human rights due diligence, that's very good human rights, very good environmental impact. Now, we don't know about all these institutions, but counterbalance, our main target is the European Investment Bank, and the human rights and environmental due diligence of the bank is very weak. One of our partners, Bankwatch, made a study comparing several multilateral development banks, amongst which the EIB. The EIB was below World Bank, etc., which is not a very high bar, I would say, on that level. So there are huge risks, and I cannot really say names or etc., but from both inside the Commission and inside some of these institutions, I hear voices who are concerned, especially about critical raw material projects. The EIB 10 years ago stopped financing mining projects because there were too many scandals. Now there's political pressure since 1 or 2 years to again do these kind of projects. This will lead to problems. Like if nothing changes, if the words are just words and not real procedures, which, because there is a balance of power. Let's be honest about this. Like this is the elephant in the room, no? Like between these EU companies and investors and local communities, there is unequal power relations. So if you don't install these processes, in all likelihood, there will be some problems. So this is on the processes, and on this level there are many issues, and so the human rights issues, the water issue with the hydrogen and several, there are so many. These are real threats, and these are real threats that we will have, that there will be a lot of negative impacts. A thing on which Magnus talked about, the private sector mobilization, I really want to say something about this, because it's not new. It's the Global Gateway didn't invent this. The World Bank started this today from billions. We're going to mobilize from billions to trillions for the Sustainable Development Goals. And what we've seen time and again is that these private investors, they don't deliver. If you look at the numbers for climate finance, the private sector mobilization by the public investment banks, it doesn't work really well in the poor countries, because it's less profitable to do, and the de-risking mechanisms used, so the mechanisms used by the public banks to make it a bit more profitable, it doesn't work to really get the money there. In fact, it's even worse. Hikma, you talked about the debt issue, rightfully, because grants, it's not grants, it's loans. Actually, since 2022, from institutional investors, in the Global South country, $140 billion more was taken from them because governments in the Global South paid back debt to them. Then these investors invested in these countries. So we are really like this private sector mobilization. For me, it's not even, this is not against the private sector, but with what we say that we want to do, it's not really a very efficient strategy. And so I really think that if our goal is to have mutual beneficial partnerships, etc., we really have to mobilize public money in a way that we can prioritize local needs, including local actors, and prioritize, really start from design a project together based on local needs, and then see how you finance this. Not start from for which companies or investors you want some nice cookie to give, etc., and then design some project around this and say that it's good for everyone.
Thank you, Frank. I have 2 questions for you that I'd like, because it's very intriguing and important what you said. I mean, you said the power balance, and I absolutely get that, but our partner countries around the world have a choice. I mean, we are not the only people in town that are going there and suggesting connectivity projects of different kind. Things have changed. We have China, we have Turkey, we have India, there's the World Bank, there's all kinds of things. So the power balance really is the choice that they have. And they are, from what I see tomorrow at the forum, quite a lot of the countries are there at the level of heads of state. So there's a game being played there, I think, that perhaps you can talk about. And you said, very importantly, mobilize public finance. But if I'm not mistaken, you guys are the specialists in the room. That is going down. I mean, our focus in the MFF and the rest of it is going to be very much on defense expenditure, and if I understand correctly, much less on issues of social value. So if you could answer those two for me, or and suggest maybe some way forward on these issues.
There was one thing I didn't get. What is going down?
Social spending, more generally.
Oh. So power balance relations, and well, yes, of course. I think one of the things is for Europe, where it's probably on the long term, and I think I really think this is not the most important thing with what we're discussing here, because it's about development and the responsibility of EU, but also I don't think we're really presenting a very interesting offer. And I think it's also on this level, it would be, I think, in our own interest to offer much better conditions, much better projects, to be more inward looking, because basically with all this focus on our own competitiveness, our own companies, our own investors, etc., it's a very inward looking approach. And it's not because you manage to do projects that it's really what you could be offering. I think it's this, and of course there are a lot of other actors in town. The world has changed a lot, and I don't think that because there is geopolitical competition that it's okay to become mega transactional and just serve our own interests. No, I think this is the moment where you really try to build strong connections, and you really try to help them. You commit to the values like the climate help, the development assistance that we need to give, as Hikma was saying. That's really something I would say now more than ever you need to commit to this. And on the social spending and the defense spending, well, yes, you're obviously completely right, and I think that's a battle to wage. It's really like on the importance of the social and the climate spending on the long term. I think it's really a mistake that we are disregarding climate action for economic interests, because the economic impact of climate change, it's very big. It just takes a little bit longer for the costs to come to us. I just think it means that the lobby around the decision making has too much power. It's not because it's economically a good thing to do.
Thank you very much. I think that gives us the context in which we're talking about the Global Gateway as well. That's why I think it's important to ask the wider questions. Veronica, you're online. Can we come back to you? There you are. Okay.
Yes.
Veronica, you did talk about memoranda of understanding that have been signed, and you talked about the Lobito corridor. And I was just wondering if you give us a little bit more information that you promised you would on what you see is happening. There is a difference between the reality and what we're being told.
So, just also a bit of additional information about the Lobito corridor. So the Lobito corridor is a railway transport infrastructure that was from a G7 partnership, in terms of the G7 partnership for global infrastructure investment, where the efforts are also just like the EU Global Gateway are aligned to the mobilization of about 600 million in terms of 600 billion for high quality infrastructure projects targeting low and middle income countries towards advancing issues of gender equality, raising labor and environmental standards, transparency and accountability, and promoting also anti-corruption measures. And the Lobito Corridor project was actually born out of a memorandum of understanding, like I mentioned, established in in 2023 October between the EU, US, and those the other African countries, which are Zambia, Angola, DRC, as well as financing banks such as the Africa Development Bank and the Africa Finance Corporation. This is an infrastructure project which primarily will be premised around the mobilization of finances from the European Union and various banks and financial institutions, is premised by the EU Global Gateway. And as such, this project hasn't actually taken off the ground. There are still preliminary studies and initiatives. Particularly for my presentation, I'll be much more specific to the extension railway, which is a greenfield railway, which is a new railway, which connects Chingola in DRC and Luakano in Angola. So it is an extension of the original Benguela railway line, which is known as the Loop Corridor. But there is also an extension that's going to be inward, focusing mainly connecting Angola to DRC, which is a sort of a new railway line. And as such, one of the key challenges that has premised this investment has obviously around the mobilization of the financing for the project, which is still very unclear. I think it also speaks about the issues that the Member of Parliament did make mention of, that there's an issue of communication gap, particularly around that. What we all just know from the ground is that the Africa Finance Corporation so far is the developer with regards to the Zambia-Lobito Railway extension. And so far, we're not clear how much has been actually been committed beyond the claims that have just been put on media by the Africa Finance Corporation, that commitments have been made for about $4 to $6 billion US. There's been a feasibility study that has been done by one of the consultants under AFC. This feasibility study was concluded early this year, but the public is still not aware of its tenants. So there are still issues that are related, that when it comes to the MOU that was signed, the EU was going to be much more instrumental towards promoting issues of transparency and accountability, and leading around issues of the feasibility study, as well as the environmental and social impact assessment. But concerns then really start being on the ground in terms of, does this really translate to a mutual beneficial partnerships that are also spearheaded by the EU's democratic values of transparency and accountability, when such important documentation, which really dictates to how much really is needed for the financing of this project, which ultimately leads to even the financing modalities that are going to be crucial, whether this will come in the form of the loan that is, or a grant. And in most cases, I think from the other presenters, it's quite clear that the financing modalities so far are towards loans. And without that full picture in terms of understanding how much will be needed to finance that project, and whether it is a viable and a value for money project aligned to the national development priorities for a debt-ridden country such as Zambia, and also really falling short in terms of a lot of human development indicators, it really becomes a major concern for us as an organization that is premised on issues of addressing issues of inequality and issues of poverty and the injustice. Another concern for us has been the issue around, maybe another concern that I would also...
Excuse me, sorry, I'm very rude. I shouldn't interrupt you, but we are running a quick short of time, and there will be questions from our participants. So if any detail is missing from what you've said, please bring it up during the Q&A. But I'd like to move on, and please stay online. And once again, apologies for interrupting you. Thank you very much. Let me turn to you, Kaisha, and to get some input from you on your project that you've talked about, and how those can be made slightly more. Do you have the same concerns about transparency and accountability and human rights? So please, yeah.
Yeah. In broader context, if I see Kazakhstan, we have huge two neighbor countries like China and Russia. It's not easy for us, yeah. And also in South part, in Central Asia, we have Taliban, Afghanistan. So, and of course, geopolitics in broader context is dimension also very sensitive for us. In this case, for Europe, Kazakhstan is a key partner in reduced dependency from China and Russia. For us, it's good. And we really have a lot of, expectation from these projects. Yeah. Yeah, we're still exciting, but risk of become just, as we learn now from my colleagues, but just to be a resource supply, like raw materials abundance. And without a strong national industry policy and without meaningful participation, we may lose the change to build our own value change. Because of course my government will follow an investment. It's time to be open for investment, European investment. But also we have your pressure from Russia, and civic space is shrinking more and more. And foreign agent law was adopted in Kyrgyzstan, and my Kazakhstan now think about change law for NGO too. And we of course will stay like platform and have dialogue on this with my government. This is concern about civic space also. In this reason, issues related with participation, real meaningful participation can be under big question. And we see lack of transparency and public participation, and this investment agreement are often accessible to public and for CSO. And we are now part of dialogue now, and we see for future maybe European approach and project will show us best standard how public dialogue and this project and community need assessment will be under this great approach. And also environment safety risks. Of course, we have not a good lot of experience previous projects, not with global gateway, like in ArcelorMittal, we have a very bad picture. Maraldi village when local community protested from cyanide-based gold mining. All of this was under pressure of government and policy. It's not clear for, and also nuclear power plant in Kazakhstan, October referendum. Yeah, and concern was administrative control and civic space was closed. I was a part of campaign against building power plant in Kazakhstan, nuclear power plant. But yeah, our referendum was as usually in Soviet style, under control, and people voted who are not independent. They voted for building power plant in Kazakhstan. So it's just what we learn. It's our situation. And of course, weak integration of ASG and human rights standards. Let's explain. Yeah, we don't have existed a framework for a mechanism how this corporative accountability, gender inclusion, and also social safeguards, how it's work in practical. And it's the reason why I said we have very weak national economic policy, and we will follow in investment. And our expectation from this European project under Global Gateway should be follow, highest standards for our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Kaisha. I think a lot of food for thought there, and you're taking part in the forum tomorrow, and you will be, I hope, taking these concerns, these messages to that body, right?
Hope we will have opportunity to do intervention from CSO. Okay. I will use this opportunity. Hope.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Hikma, I was wondering also from the angle of women's empowerment and the feminist organization you're working for, if you have any serious sort of ideas and messages that you'd like to share with us about the projects that you are involved in, the study you did.
Thank you so much. Indeed, just to react to what Udo said when talking about the benefits. Of course, Morocco benefits from these projects This project, they bring investments, technology and visibility. But the question is, who inside Morocco really benefits from this? Like, if the benefits are concentrated among large companies, while rural communities, they lose access to land and water, then the balance is not fair. We need projects that strengthen local industries. And there are many ways to involve like small industries in the whole chain of production. And to create stable jobs and respect the environment. And Morocco's development model is not only about, it doesn't have to be only about exporting green energy to Europe. It's also about social inclusion, gender equality, and more importantly, territorial justice. So yes, there are benefits, but they must be shared benefits. That is the difference between a simple energy transition and a just one. Because today, in simple words, once again, Africa is borrowing money to build infrastructure that powers European prosperity. So a fairer model starts with grants instead of loans, so that green investments does not deepen or trigger new austerity cycles. Because we feel like we are going to be in a austerity roller coaster once again, dressed in green. So green dependency is not a green transition. And it also means co-designing these projects with local communities and local governments, and not just announcing them from Brussels. So Europe can make a real difference by transferring technology, because here you have countries with greater means to support our countries who are still building their economies. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So let me open the floor to questions from you, questions and comments. If they're brief and to the point, I would be delighted. I will turn to you. And Stephanie, if you have questions that you want to bring in, just put up your hand as well. I'll take a few from the room here. So I had a person here. Yes, please. Yes, and I'll come to you. Please just identify yourself very quickly.
Yes, hello. My name is Sabine Muscat, and I'm an advisor for public sector and think tanks, mostly working on digital cooperation here in Brussels. And I wanted to thank you really for all your inputs and your critical insights into both project implementation and consultation mechanisms, but also the governance issues way at the top. I was wondering, I really am interested in your local views of, because you know these projects very well. So me working on digital cooperation, I would just be curious if you have been looking at any digital connectivity projects. I mean, in Central Asia, we have a satellite project that involves SES, or we have the Medusa cable, or the Lobito corridor also has digital components. But if you don't, that's okay too. Then I would like to ask you instead whether you can share any best practices. Like, have you seen, such as MEP Bullmann did, he shared an example of a project where he thinks this is going well. And I do know a lot of Team Europe stakeholders, if you will, here, both here and on the ground, who think all day about how to make projects inclusive, rights respecting and sustainable. So have you seen anything that would show us what right looks like? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to take rounds of questions because we're left with 4 panelists, right? And so I'm going to turn to you, but in a minute when I've heard from everyone here. So Stephanie, can you read out a question or two, please?
Microphone.
Yes, a question from the online audience that echoes notably the concerns on civil society involvement, and a question specifically from our colleague Gordon over at ActionAid Ireland, who says, given the many challenges and shortcomings shared by the panel, on a practical level, how can the Global Gateway be reformed urgently, so pre-scale up? Is there a way to do that?
Thank you very much. Lady over there, please. First here. Oh, okay. Well, just pass the microphone on to the lady in front of you.
Very good.
Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Chat Garcia Ramelo. I'm from an international civil society organization. We work on digital connectivity as well as democratic digital governance. My question is, and I'm speaking in one of the sessions in the forum we are participating, so I really came here to understand what the civil society perspectives are and to try and bring some of that perspective. And thank you very much for this thoughtful discussion so far. What I want to know is very specific. What do you think is possible? What's realistically can we move? What can we move in terms of perspective in the forum itself? Just like the specific objective in moving either the narrative or, like a specific target there, though. That's a question. Is there a possibility in terms of moving the conversation and the direction of the global gateway? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The lady right in front. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Rita Carneiro. I'm based in Angola and working with Lobito Corridor. So if you allow me, I would like just to make a short remark. I've been working for the last 40 years on the field in several private sector projects. And one of the things that makes me often a little bit awkward is that in what concerns Global Gateway, often you mix up private sector, huge companies with local SMEs. I was so happy Udo mentioned it, but I think they are not sufficiently mentioned. And through their development, jobs are created, local communities are supported. And very often they are not the interlocutors, and very often because they are not sufficiently supported to get organized and being one of the interlocutors. If you allow me, in 2 words, what I'm bringing in is the organization of a platform, a dialogue platform among the chambers of trade along the Lobito Corridor on the Angolan part, in order to make them an interlocutor, a valid interlocutor at the table of discussions. And if you allow me again, maybe one of the things that I find more frequently, is exactly the lack of support to local communities to get organized in a single voice. Thank you.
Sir, yeah.
Thank you so much. Antonio Gambini from Global Health Advocates. So we talked a lot about energy, hydrogen, climate, but there are also other sectors in the Global Gateway. So health is a key sector. So a few questions, reflections. Is Global Gateway investing enough in health? Is it the right model, healthcare investments, especially in terms of private sector and public sector? And when we talk about who benefits, whose interest, win-win or not, isn't health something that definitely benefits everybody? And investing in healthcare has definitely a future impact for everybody on the planet, including Europeans, especially when you think about pandemics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Sasha Gabizon with Women Engaged for a Common Future. We're an ecofeminist network, and I have a question for Kaisha, well, for all of you really. Kaisha, I think you mentioned that the local communities have no information about the contracts, and if things go wrong, who would pay for the pollution cleanup for these farmers, etc. Because you have had many problems in Kazakhstan. So can you say something about that, access to understanding the contracts? And that is the same question maybe also to all of you. How would you do that? I mean, I hear, even in Holland, we don't see the contracts, we don't know about the investment protection clauses. We're giving, I don't know how much money to Tata Steel to pollute us, and they still get subsidies from us. I mean, it's everywhere a bad situation with investor protection, and when they pollute, they don't pay. So how can we know more about this? Is this an important issue?
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to take another question now, if there is one from anyone in the room. Stephanie, is there anything that is online? Yeah, please.
A question from our colleagues over at Venro. What role does the Gateway play in the establishment of an African continental free trade area?
Okay, let's go with this. Veronica, you're online, and there was this question that talked about how we can organize better local communities, and discussion was also about small and medium-sized enterprises. And I was wondering if you can share your experience and your thoughts on that, please. And anything else you want to come in on from the other questions, of course, as well.
Thank you so much. I totally agree with the submissions that have been made in terms of the importance of creating investments that create or contribute to multiplier economic effects, especially to a continent like Africa, which has had a case or a legacy of the mining sector, for example, being an enclave sector, which is totally divorced and not having any proper linkages with other sectors of the economy. And as such, the proposals and the expectations are that the investments that are going to be made, whether it's the Lobito railway infrastructure and construction, there is need to also have that discourse of ensuring that local linkages with small and medium enterprise, especially for those that are constituted by women and youth, are actually also plugged in terms of those partnership investments and provided those opportunities, issues of enabling decent work, job creation. And more so, I think when we look at the Lobito corridor itself, beyond it being a transport infrastructure, it also it is also expected to actually contribute towards increased investment, especially in Zambia's copper belt and the DRC, especially around critical raw materials. And a question, and for us as Oxfam, the fundamental issue is Zambia is a country that has had a legacy of poor environmental management practices, especially with the mining sector. And I don't know if some of you would know that there's been a recent high toxic pollution case that happened by one of the Chinese mining processing companies who affected and discharged a lot of effluent into one of the major sources of water and livelihoods in Zambia. And as such, if the Global Gateway is going to be really a model that is going to really be definitive in terms of it being different, the EU has to, and private investors do really have a role in terms of strengthening the regulatory provisions within environmental management in Zambia, and also the institutional and monitoring of environmental processes related to some of these infrastructure as well as investments. But importantly, I think linked to the issue that communities do actually also need to be supported is that a lot of our African institutions do lack the capacity to effectively monitor and provide oversight, especially on environmental management practices. And hence, the model that we are proffering as Oxfam and civil society is that support should be made towards local communities and civil society to be actually complementary partners in terms of exercising the monitoring, the oversight in some of these investments that really pose as high risk to the rights of communities and the environment. So we are saying this has to be situated around a win-win discourse where beyond just de-risking financially, it has to actually contribute to the broad-based development trajectories and expectations of the people of African partners. And these are what we are also proposing, that it's important for us as civil society and local communities to be really given a voice and a stake in terms of the EU Global Gateway.
Thank you very much, Veronica, for answering that and going beyond and giving some more recommendations. Thank you very much indeed. Kaisha, could you pick some of the questions that you want to address?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, digitalization project in Central Asia, Kazakhstan, it's great opportunity. We're really excited of this opportunity and work with European supported projects. So, and we have several projects in Central Asia, for example, Team Europe satellite connectivity project for rural areas for Central Asia. And it is a great project and expectation what about 3 million people currently will lack in broadcast access, and maybe for implementation, for realizing this project successfully, we will have access to rural territories of Kazakhstan. It's huge territory who will access to internet. And also it's for us also important to part of this EU strategy, part of this be, because digitalization links and promoted digital infrastructure and EU voice matters civics technology for decision making. It's also for us, give us opportunity for future, I think, when Global Gateway project will implement it, maybe this can be synergy of this project because public participation and decision making, and we have euthanasia, like a petition like that instrument, but it's never enough. Yeah, people just learn, and if youth and women will have opportunity in local community, farmers will have opportunity to use this instrument, it will be great opportunity. So it's all of these million grants, projects supported by you, amount of this project can be really supportive for our activities in Kazakhstan. We're waiting for foreign board. So, and also we have in Kazakhstan, like national policy of digitalization. And in this case, I think very touched with EU policy on digitalization and not only for Central Asia, also for especially for Kazakhstan. Yeah. So.
And the question about access to contracts and protection.
Yes, and you know, related to this, thank you, Sasha, for your question. Contracts, unfortunately, not from Global Gateway, but other contract we have Caspian oil contracts with international huge company which work in Kazakhstan more than 30 years, and we never see this contract. It's not open, unfortunately, and maybe disclose non-sensitive investment agreements will be good for us and Global Gateway projects and initiative, because we don't have access to this information. And it's very hard to participate if we don't know what is inside of these agreements. So, and maybe publishing of these contracts. And also in native language, in Kazakh language, people should understand this, not in English. Yeah, and not only in English. And also will be nice to have consultative procedure, clear, open, clear procedure, how we can monitor this contract, how we can participate, how we can apply, you know, for with digitalization tools and keep our voice more stronger. So now it's contract closed. We don't know about this. Yeah.
Thank you, Kasia. Hikma. There was also a question that I thought is interesting, if you can answer it, is the role of the Global Gateway in the Africa Free Trade after African Free Trade, AAF, or whatever it is. Africa Continental Free Trade Area, if you can.
Yeah, okay. I would like to first to react to this concern regarding transparency and access to contracts, because this is really important. Many of the, or all of them, many of the contracts and feasibility studies for this large scale infrastructure project, they are not publicly available. And this makes it difficult for researchers and journalists and civil society to assess whether these projects they are aligned with national priorities, but also with environmental safeguards. We also need, and I want to highlight this, we also need more transparency when it comes to environmental impact assessments, because not just whether they exist, because I know they exist, but whether they are made publicly first and updated as the projects evolve. And without that, it's very hard to ensure accountability or to build trust at the local level. Answering the question about the health sector. Yeah, Global Gateway finances many other key sectors, health, education, etc. But once again, the real question, it's how it's done. Whether it's, once again, through grants or whether it's through debts that increases the austerity burden. So if financing supports like local capacity, for example, by training medical staff and investing in local pharmaceutical production, then yes, this can be very beneficial. But it doesn't matter which sector we are talking about, it's about the approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Veronica, are you still online? I have 2 minutes if you have time to answer the question on the link between the Lobito corridor and maybe the wider creation of the free trade area across the continent. Can you answer that?
Yes, I think that's a very important and very valid question in terms of the linkages with the African Free Continental Trade Agreement, which is basically a framework that is meant to guide African governments with regards to promoting intra-trade amongst themselves beyond looking at other destinations in terms of trade partners. And as such, one of the key facets for promoting intra-trade or regional integration and continental integration and intra-trade would be the need for infrastructure that connects and enables the movement of various products across the continent. And more importantly, a corridor like the Lobito corridor, it's a multifaceted transport system which is intended to actually promote it in itself beyond the outlook that it is going to be a model towards the transportation of goods to EU and other destinations outside Africa. We're also looking at it, and African governments and citizens are also looking at it as a transport infrastructure aimed to also connect and promote international intertrade amongst African governments. So definitely it is situated and there's a nexus around it promoting intra-trade. And ultimately what will be key will be the modalities around the financing, which will be also needed to be put into total context, because there are also other corridors that are also being constructed and also being refurbished, like the Tazara railway line. So in essence, it's about the issues of does it really bring a value proposition towards the intended focus of promoting and boosting intra-trade based on a model that enables total value to be harnessed, and whether the loan agreements, if at all, are going to be beneficial towards the envisioned goal that Africa has and Zambia and other countries has.
Thank you very much, Veronica, for that answer. Frank, to come to you. Quite a lot of questions are important, and I think one of the things that I think, there are two questions that would be nice if you could answer. One of them is, can the Global Gateway be reformed? I mean, that was a very valid question from an Irish colleague. And then a question also about, is it possible to move things and maybe even change the narrative? What do you think can happen? And then, of course, up to you to choose something else. We have about...
Yeah, it's not an easy task in 3 minutes, but I would say actually, like, can it be reformed or not? Like, I would actually start from the point of view that, and it goes a bit on what Ikma was saying, like, the first thing is that the grants are a super important element, and this should like the replay like this story that the Commission is pushing a lot with like the aid didn't work, we need to do infrastructure development. Like this is not right and it's not just. So in any case, like this MDBs, investment banks model, it should not replace aid. That's for me, that's aid. That's really the first point, super important. Then, and it's important to be a little bit nuanced here, and that's why I think like daunting task in 3-4 minutes. I really think that with public investment, public banks, you can do positive things. And if you look at the whole multilateral development banks, other public banks, what already exists, you could mobilize a lot public investment with other public investments. Like I would say, like not de-risking private investment in the first place, but to combine different levels of public investment. And this allows to do projects which have long-term economic viability. They are not loss-making, but they will not meet short-term profit expectations that many of these private sectors want. And this allows to do a lot more projects which have a lot more social, environmental, local benefits. And if you would make a strategy, so this is more of the big picture, no? Like if you would make a strategy which preserves aid and focuses on these kind of infrastructure, etc., and what other kind of investment, there's a lot of things you could do. And we have we have a focus on this, and we also apply this to the EU, investment within the EU, that for us, like green public services, so access to affordable energy, housing, and transport, these are key things because these are key sectors for decarbonization, and they are key essential public services we all need for a decent living, and which have become a lot more expensive in the cost of living crisis that we know in Europe, but is much worse even outside of Europe from the past year. So these are, if you would focus on this, then you could really do something interesting, and you could really leverage public investment from different levels of public investment. So I think that we're quite far away from this, unfortunately. And I think that one of the main things that we have to do in this context, which is politically very difficult, is that civil society, that we have to work together on this, that we have to share the knowledge, to sit together, to make strategy together. And you mentioned the African trade agreement, but I think also in Latin America, there will be what's the word again? Soon, and there will be, and the Global Gateway will be very important on the agenda. And I think that capacity building and building movement with CSOs here and there, and that we as CSOs in the EU, that we take their point of view on the local level, really that we take this as a central approach, that this is super important to build not just a counter narrative, but also a counter power in a way from our side. On a very specific level, like things that we could improve, I think that there's things to be done on to ask on transparency. Even though I think that seeing contracts, I would love to, but I haven't seen them. But I would love to see the contracts. I think it's also really it's really also important to ask for that the role of civil society in there's discussion of the role of civil society in the roadmaps of EU delegations. I think this is important to really stress on. There was another one, but I'm being distracted over here. So maybe I leave here, and I don't know, like really so.
I know I've seen people getting very agitated at the back. No, do you have a question that you'd like to put? Yeah, please do. Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to take something quickly now.
Thank you so much, Shada, and thank you to all the panelists. I'm Antonia from Alliance 2015, and the question I wanted to ask it comes from a reflection on the fact that I was here when you launched last year, and I appreciate so much the evidence, the speaking truth, the working on actual research and experience from countries. But what I was struck by today was that you came again with the same evidence, but deeper, stronger messages, excellent proposals. But our colleague who sadly left us from the council did not respond in any way to, if I may just be really frank, to anything that you said. It was a completely different narrative. And I think that the proposals, and particularly the ones you've just made, Frank, are really clear and excellent. And I would like us to reflect at the end, and I'd love your thoughts on this, about what are the levers for change now? Like, if the parliamentarians that could be making important points about this are not invited to actually be part of Global Gateway Forum discussions, if civil society is invited at the end as observers with no role, none of this is good. It suggests that all of this brilliant evidence that we've assembled isn't yet being heard. And I'm just wondering what we think are the levers for change now. I think we're going in the right direction. We're doing all the right things, but what are those levers of change? What do you see as possibilities to actually get these points across? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I would say that holding a discussion like this is very important before the start of the forum. I think these messages need to get through, and if we have journalists in this room, I hope you will be reporting on that. I'll definitely be writing on this. So I think that's a very important contribution we can make. And there's another hand that's gone up. Okay, I'll take 1 point, because I'm sure that Jean will also discuss this. Yes, please, quickly, yeah.
Thank you. I'm Jacob Langer with the Danish media specializing in development aid. And thank you for educational inputs here. But I'm also left with the feeling, Frank, you said earlier about the elephant in the room, and just because there's geostrategic competition now, it doesn't mean that, etc. But isn't there a reality that's pressuring the EU on this level? We can all maybe imagine a better world in a sense, but the fact is there's a lot of pressure. And also to you, Tika, about transparency, it's a super valid point. But is it also up to, let's say, the Moroccan government or any other government? Sometimes I imagine that given the choice between an EU investor, EU money, and Chinese money, and if it's down to forced upon transparency, well, maybe they're going to pick the Chinese because they don't want to share this transparency. So isn't there a reality on the ground that we sadly need to take on board and work with? I'm just curious. I don't have the answer to this, but I think that must be a real dilemma out there. Thank you.
Okay, any last minute questions also? Right, okay, one last minute one. Well, actually, all right, I'm going to take 5 minutes more for the answers.
Thank you, Lavinia from Solidar. Just building up on the last 2 points that were made, I was wondering what's the role of partner governments, no? Because from our side, like civil society in the EU and local partner countries, we are kind of on the same page. We have a lot of concerns on Global Gateway, lack of transparency, lack of involvement. But then we hear the person from the Danish presidency or commission that they keep selling this, but that's what the partner governments want.
Yeah.
So is there some advocacy or work that we can do towards them to bring our demands there and say, okay, but that's not what the people want? So yeah, that was my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so very quickly answering these 3 points, Frank.
First, something that we that can still be worked on, and it's a timely thing to do, because in the negotiations of the next MFF, what they want to do is to change the regulation of the use of the development budget so that it's more geopolitical and less development. But the one thing that the parliament has something to say about is how the guarantees are used, and the European Court of Auditors. And so for journalists, this is something important to write about, honestly. The European Court of Auditors is very critical of that the Commission is not able to demonstrate development impact in how the guarantees are used. And this is what it's obliged to do by treaties and the regulation of and the ICI, to be, sorry, the only acronym I will use today. But this is really the key thing. It's the one lever that there is legally to say something, to have impact on the development side. And I have to say, Sikela, in a letter to us, was so kind to give another source of a think tank they worked with, who said exactly the same thing, that the guarantees don't have robust mechanism to show the development impact. So for this, at least I have to thank him. And on the geopolitical and the realism, I really don't agree with this. I really don't agree with this. On which level? It's first of all, I think we should think a lot more in terms of cooperation. Maybe we should try to work together more with some of the actors we say we don't like. Not me, but European elite. On the other hand, like maybe you should also offer better terms. Maybe you can get more transparency if you offer more high value economic added activities. In our Critical Raw Materials Act, what we want is more extraction. There is circularity mentioned in the Critical Raw Materials Act. In all the strategic projects outside of the EU, there's none on circularity. To give an example, so to give these, like, it seems as if these things of like local jobs, high value, high economic added value, etc., that these are like, I don't know, like soft things that we talk about as CSOs, but this is what really can also make the difference. If you offer really more in the country, and then in exchange, you can maybe also ask other things which are not so easy for a partner government. And I would try to look at it in this way, really, and not just say like, oh, because Trump, etc., they're all transactional, so now we can also become transactional. No, that's a dead end. Really, it's a dead end.
Thank you very much, Frank. And I think that is perhaps the change in narrative that the change in lens and narrative that you were looking for. Okay, it is now 11 o'clock. So I'm giving you 1 minute each to come in with something really important that you have to say ahead of tomorrow's, and then I'll pass the floor to Jean. So please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for great opportunity to work together. And I learned a lot from this session. I don't know. I really feel good. But if I will back, yeah, and if I will back to my home, to my villages, which I return right now, and 1 week before, I just remind and never forget what people ask, community ask, for future project. Will projects the environment protect, safeguard fertile land, and provide a real job? And it is in the center of my mind when we call it about it. And my message is global gateway investment must prove the value by applying highest European standard of environment protection, human rights, and social responsibility in every project and every community in Kazakhstan, in other country. Okay.
Thank you very much. Veronica, your minute, final thought.
All right. For me and for us in the Global South, I think a key message we would want to have shared tomorrow would be that the EU Global Gateway should move beyond the rhetoric of creating mutual benefit partnerships, but should actually translate to agreements that nurture social contracts for projects that result in diverse economic linkages through job creation, supporting women and youth-led enterprises, and also improving the livelihoods of the local communities.
Thank you very much for that. And Hikma, your final words?
Thank you so much, and thank you for this such an interesting discussion. And just to close, I think what we have been seeing today shows that partnerships in the Global Gateway framework can only succeed if they are grounded in trust and shared vision. And it's not about who finances what. It's not about choosing between Europe and China. And China, it's not a beauty contest. It's like, but about who benefits at the end, and who decides, and how we make sure that this transition are fair to everyone. Thank you so much.
So my final word is thank you very much to the panelists, including the two who are not here in the room with us, and thank you to all of you for your question and participation. And now my pleasure to give the floor to Jean Saldana from Eurodad.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
very much to the speakers. Thank you very much, Shana, for moderating this really interesting and timely discussion. I hope you have found this useful as participants. I do hope that there was a lot of media who was listening, because our intention was to ensure that there was a critical and alternative perspective to what you're going to hear tomorrow at the Global Gateway Forum. And we've heard from Udo Bullman, and we've heard also from our colleague from Kazakhstan, who will be there, that they're not really sure how much of space there will be for those critical voices at the forum. We are unfortunately in a situation that now we have a Global Gateway Forum instead of a marketplace of voices that used to be the European Development Days. And that is unfortunate. And that is why we need this space over here. And I do hope that everybody will speak about this. And I do hope that there will be a lot of writing about this as well. But over to a reflection on what we heard this morning. Of course, we heard from the official voice that there is this massive challenge to achieve the SDGs. But the question that we heard again and again, is the Global Gateway the right approach? When you consider that the main objective of Agenda 2030 is to leave no one behind, the testimony that we've heard from Kazakhstan, from South Africa, from Morocco, and from many other partners is that it is not the right one. Yes, there is need for investment, but this should be part of a much bigger picture that should be drawn by the countries themselves towards a just transition. And investment, notably public investment, is only part of the resource cake. And private investment, as we've heard again and again, is a double-edged sword in a debt crisis where austerity is being imposed again and again on countries. But what we have heard this morning is that the Global Gateway is the European perspective only. Almost half of all Global Gateway projects are climate and energy projects. A lot of Global Gateway energy and mining projects are tailored for energy and mining exports to the EU, rather than improving access to local populations. Not all projects are public, and a lot of information is missing on the companies benefiting from these projects. The impact assessments and the criteria under which the projects are selected are also often missing. And we heard about European Global Gateway being a superior offer. We heard about this repeatedly from the start. And we have the inequality marker. In 2023, the European Commission introduced this inequality marker as a fundamental tool to achieve its overarching objective of addressing inequalities by building inclusive and sustainable societies. But from what we've heard from the Commission is that this inequality marker is still just a piece of paper. They themselves do not know how to implement it. In general, the impact on gender income inequality is not being properly measured or properly taken into account in the selection and financing of projects, as we've heard in one after the other testimony this morning. So 4 years on, it is high time to take all these concerns on board. As we've heard from Udo, there is a legal requirement that at least 93% of the spending should benefit partner countries. So I would echo what was said at the start. Stop using countries as a battlefield for geopolitics. Ensure that the Global Gateway is redesigned to serve a genuinely just transition based on common good. And I will echo what Frank said this morning. Let's stop talking about the Global Gateway as a beauty contest And that was not what, yeah, that is what, well, that was what was said. And that was also what this was the spirit of what you said. Let's stop using it as a beauty contest. Let's start talking about the common good rather than transactionalism. Thank you.
So now we're really at the end of our conversation. Thank you once again for participating, and let's give our panelists a big applause. And thank you.
Look.